45 years I worked at the Pittston post office, and not a single envelope was ever lost through my fault. 45 years I got up at 6 in the morning to be on site by 7, sorting mail and sending it on. Little messages with big hopes inside. To think, for nearly half a century I've been part of other people's stories, delivering letters, postcards, packages, fine notices, and summonses. Now, on 123 Maple Street in Pittston, Pennsylvania, I'm sitting in a chair looking out at the yellowing maples outside my window and drinking ginger tea. Beatrice always said it was good for my joints. Beatrice. It's been 3 years, but I still wake up and forget for a second that she's not there. We were together for 41 years. You get used to a person like you get used to your own hand. You don't notice until you lose it. Cancer took her quickly, just 4 months from diagnosis to funeral. She didn't want chemotherapy, she said. Normand, I'd rather go with my own hair and some dignity. Beatrice was always stubborn. I was the one in our family who was quiet, accommodating, always trying to avoid conflict. Maybe that's why, after she died, my own son started treating me so easily, as if I were an old, helpless child. Hubert's not a bad guy himself. Maybe a little weak-willed like me, but kind. He went into civil engineering, works for the municipality, checking the safety of buildings, an important job. Trouble is, he married Agatha Vincent 5 years ago, and since then our relationship has been complicated. Agatha's an elementary school teacher, which sounds harmless on its own, but behind that facade is a woman who's used to being in charge and always knows how others should live their lives. Slim, with an unnaturally straight back and brown hair always in a tight bun, she looks like a classic spinster, even though she's only 35. When she looks at me with her piercing gray eyes, I feel like a delinquent schoolboy, not someone twice her age. After Beatrice's death, Agatha took on the role of caring daughter-in-law. At first, this took the form of weekly visits with a pot of soup and checking on my medications. Then she started coming unannounced, going through my things, throwing out what she considered junk, mostly the little things Beatrice kept. This was followed by financial advice, suggestions to sell the house, too big for one person, and move closer to them. Although closer in practice meant a small outbuilding in their yard, which Hubert had begun to fix up without my consent. I refused to move. This was my and Beatrice's home, where we'd raised Hubert, where all our memories were stored. Besides, despite my age, I'm still quite independent. Yes, sometimes my knee bothers me, especially in the rain, but that's no reason to give up my independence. Today is Tuesday, the day of Agatha's visit. She always comes on Tuesdays, bringing groceries and making sure I haven't blown all my money on silly things. She calls my bird-watching books, my new binoculars, or my swimming pool membership stupid. In her opinion, at my age, it's time to save every penny so that I don't have to sit on my kids' necks. The truth is that my pension is quite decent, and Beatrice left me a good insurance policy. I've never been a spender, but I've never been a cheapskate. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. Agatha is never late. She came in holding 2 bags of groceries. Normand, you didn't lock the door again, was the first thing she said when she crossed the threshold. How many times do I have to tell you? It's dangerous in this day and age. Hello, Agatha. I tried to smile. I was locking the door, just opening it when I saw you coming. She pressed her lips together, clearly not believing me, and walked into the kitchen. Have you been eating convenience foods again? Agatha opened the trash can and shook her head when she saw the packaging from the cooked dinner. It's full of sodium and preservatives. No wonder your blood pressure's skyrocketing. I take my meds regularly, I pointed out as I watched her set down the food she'd brought. Medication won't help if you eat junk. I'll make you a vegetable stew for a few days. And I need to check your utility bills. I thought the gas bill was too high last time. I watched in silence as she tended to my kitchen. Agatha has a special talent for making me feel like an intruder in my own home. By the way, Hubert finished remodeling the room in the annex. It's very cozy now, even has a little terrace. You should at least take a look. Agatha, we've talked about this. I'm not going to move. But why? She turned to me, holding a vegetable slicer. You're all alone here. If anything happens, no one will even know. Remember Mrs. Elliot on Oak Street? She fell in the bathtub and lay there for 2 days before the neighbor got worried. I'm not Mrs. Elliot, and I have a panic button. I pointed to the small device I always wore around my neck. Agatha sighed with a look of martyrdom. You're so stubborn, Normand, just like Beatrice. The mention of my wife's name from her lips has always struck me as inappropriate, almost sacrilegious. Beatrice never liked Agatha, though she tried to be polite for Hubert's sake. The rest of the visit went on as usual. Agatha cooked a meal, checked my accounts, criticized the clutter in the living room. Why aren't the books on the shelves? And left, leaving behind a feeling of intrusion and a list of things I had to do by the following Tuesday. Hubert called in the evening. He calls every 2 or 3 days, usually after Agatha's reminders. Our conversations are almost always the same. How my health is, what's new at his job, the weather, politics. Never anything deep or personal. Sakikonotam. Dad, Agatha said, you're refusing to even look at the outhouse again. I could hear the disappointment in his voice. Son, I appreciate your concern, but I'm fine here. But you're all alone out there. I'm not alone. I have neighbors, friends from the bird club, books, plus I like the quiet. Hubert sighed. Okay, Dad, just think about it again, okay? After the bell rang, I sat down in my favorite chair and looked at the picture of Beatrice on the mantelpiece. She was smiling in that way that only she could smile, both sly and gentle at the same time. They want to lock me in a cage, Bea, I said quietly, but I wasn't ready to give up yet. The next morning, as I was going through the mail, I found a letter with an unusual postmark among the flyers and invoices. The sender was the Philadelphia law firm of Preston and Associates. I opened the envelope with slight trepidation. Lawyers rarely bring good news. This time, however, the news was rather puzzling. My brother Oliver, whom we hadn't spoken to in nearly 20 years, had passed away a month ago. No one had seen fit to tell me directly. According to his will, I was entitled to a substantial sum of money and some property in the Bahamas. The letter asked me to contact a representative of the firm to complete the necessary paperwork. Oliver was 5 years younger than me. We had been close when we were young, but then our paths diverged. He was an adventurer, always looking for easy money and quick success. The last time we saw each other was at our parents' funeral. He came in an expensive suit, in an expensive car, but he didn't offer any money for the funeral. Everything fell on my shoulders. Then there were some vague promises, plans that never materialized, and gradually our communication came to naught. The news of his death caused a strange feeling, not exactly grief, more like regret for what could have been, but did not work out. As for the inheritance, I was surprised, to say the least. I didn't even know Oliver had a business in the Bahamas. After some thought, I decided to call the law firm in question. I was connected to Mr. Preston, who confirmed the information from the letter. It turned out that Oliver owned a small but profitable tour business in the Bahamas and also had a home there. All of this, along with a rather sizable sum of money, now passed to me as the only close relative. Minus Mr. Curlington, you'll need to come to Philadelphia and sign some papers to complete the process, Mr. Preston said. It would also be good if you could visit the Bahamas to view the property and meet with your brother's partner, Mr. Errol Fisher. I promised to think about it and hung up the phone. The news required reflection. Beatrice had always said that Oliver wasn't as bad as he seemed, and that someday he would surprise me. It looked like she was right. The next day I went to Philadelphia. Mr. Preston turned out to be a gaunt man in his 60s, with attentive eyes behind the panes of his thin-rimmed glasses. He explained the details of the inheritance and let me sign the necessary papers. Your brother has changed a great deal in recent years, Mr. Curlington, he said when we had finished the formalities. He spoke of you often, regretting that he had lost touch. That information took me by surprise. I hadn't realized that Oliver had thought of me at all. When I got back to Pittston, I was expecting another visit from Agatha. This time she came with Hubert, a rare occurrence on a weekday. Papa, the papa, where have you been? Hubert looked worried. We've been calling all day. I went to Philadelphia on business, I answered without going into detail. Philadelphia? Agatha frowned. Why? You didn't say anything about the trip. I don't have to account for every move I make, I said calmly. There was an awkward pause. Hubert looked from me to his wife and back again, clearly not knowing which side to take. Of course you don't have to. Agatha said at last with a strained smile. We were just worried. You could have left a note or called. Yeah, I'll be sure to do that next time, I promised, though I wasn't sure I'd keep that promise. At dinner, I decided to tell them about the inheritance. They would find out sooner or later anyway. I left out the details, mentioning only a certain amount of money my brother had left me. The reaction was predictable. Hubert was genuinely happy for me, but Agatha's eyes lit up with a glint I had learned to recognize over the years. It's wonderful, Normand, she exclaimed. Now you don't have to worry about the future. We will help you to manage this money wisely. Thank you, but I have already decided how I will manage the inheritance, I replied. How? Agatha leaned forward, not hiding her curiosity. I'll put some of it in an account and spend some of it on myself. I've been wanting to make some plans for a long time. What plans? Agatha's voice sounded a little wary. Various, I said evasively. I hadn't thought of everything yet. After dinner, when Hubert went out on the porch to smoke, a habit Agatha had tried unsuccessfully to eradicate, she sat down beside me on the sofa. Normand, you must be careful, she began, in the tone of a teacher explaining a complicated subject to a confused student. At your age, it's easy to fall prey to scammers. If you want, I can recommend a good financial advisor. My cousin Philip works in that field. Thank you, Agatha, but I already have a consultant, Mr. Preston from Philadelphia. That lawyer, she raised an eyebrow skeptically. Norman, lawyers and financiers are different specialists. Let Philip at least look at the documents. I politely but firmly refused. Agatha wasn't used to rejection from me, and this clearly hurt her. The rest of the evening passed in tense silence. When they left, I pulled out the cruise brochures I'd bought a year ago. Beatrice had always dreamed of traveling to the Caribbean, but we kept putting it off for later. The later never came. Illness cut short all plans. Now I thought it might be a good time to fulfill that dream for both of us. Looking at the pictures of the azure sea and snow-white beaches, I suddenly felt a long-forgotten sense of anticipation awaken inside. For the first time in a long time, I looked into the future with interest, not with tired resignation. And it was a good feeling. The cruise brochures had been on my coffee table for a week now. Every morning I looked through them, studying itineraries, schedules, cabin types. This activity became a kind of ritual for me. To wake up, make strong tea, sit in a chair by the window and dream of distant islands. I remember Beatrice and I once planned such a trip. She would cut out pictures from travel magazines and put them in a special folder labeled Our Future Adventure. Every time we saved enough money, something unforeseen happened. The roof leaked, Hubert needed money for college. The old car finally broke down. Beatrice never complained, just tucked the folder away in a desk drawer with the words, Next year, Normand. Definitely next year. But next year never came. When Dr. Reynolds told us the diagnosis, the first thing Beatrice said was, Too bad we never got to see those palm trees in the Bahamas. There was no bitterness in her voice, just a slight regret, and that broke my heart more than the word inoperable in the medical report. Now, looking at the same palm trees on the glossy pages, I made a decision. The time had come. I would no longer put life on hold. I arrived at the Travel World Travel Agency on Center Street in Pittston on Tuesday, the day Agatha usually visited me. It was a conscious choice. I wanted to avoid immediate questioning and judgment. The agency was small but cozy. Behind the counter sat a woman in her 50s with short red hair and a kind smile. Her name tag read, Doris Kingsley, Senior Consultant. What can I do for you? She asked as I hesitantly stopped at the entrance. I'd like to find out about cruises to the Caribbean, I replied, feeling a little ridiculous, as if I, a 65-year-old widower, didn't have the right to dream of tropical islands. Doris, however, took my inquiry quite naturally. Of course, we have some great options. Are you traveling alone or with company? I thought for a moment. I had originally planned to travel alone, but I might invite my son and his wife. Great. Doris opened a file on her computer. When would you like to go? In the next few months, maybe October or November. That's a good choice. Hurricane season will be over and the Christmas rush won't start yet. Prices are more attractive at that time. Over the next hour, Doris showed me various cruise options. We discussed the length of the trip, the islands I wanted to visit, the types of cabins and extras. Gradually, I began to lean toward a 2-week cruise on the Caribbean Dreamliner that included stops in the Bahamas, Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, and Mexico. You'll have 3 days in the Bahamas, Doris explained, showing the itinerary on the map. It would allow you not only to go sightseeing, but also to relax, enjoy the beach, maybe explore the local sites on your own. The Bahamas. That's where Mr. Preston said Oliver's possessions were located. It seemed like a sign. Not only would I be able to fulfill Beatrice's dream, but I could also deal with my brother's inheritance. I'll take that option, I said firmly. And I'd like to make 3 reservations for myself, my son, and his wife. Doris glowed. Wonderful. Which staterooms would you prefer? I wondered again. For myself, I would have chosen something modest. Years of frugality had taught me to make do with little. But this was a special voyage, a tribute to Beatrice. Besides, the money from Oliver made it possible not to skimp. For myself, I'd like a cabin with a balcony, I finally decided. And for my son and his wife, a standard cabin with a window. When Doris told me the total, I felt my heart thud. It was considerably more than I'd ever spent on anything but a house. But then I remembered Beatrice's words. Money is just paper, Normand. Memories are priceless. So I pulled out a credit card. Very good, Mr. Curlington. Doris printed out the reservation confirmation. The cruise leaves October 28th from Miami. You'll need to get there at least a day before departure. I recommend staying at one of the hotels near the harbor. It's more convenient. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of excitement and anxiety. This was really happening. I was really going on the trip Beatrice and I had dreamed of all our lives. One more thing, Doris added. Be sure to take out travel insurance. At your age, she paused, obviously embarrassed. At my age, anything can happen, I finished for her with a smile. Don't worry, I understand. Leaving the agency, I felt different, as if I had dropped an invisible weight from my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I had done something just for me, something that wasn't dictated by routine or obligation. Now the hardest part was to tell Hubert and Agatha of my plans. I decided to invite them to dinner the following Saturday. I cooked a roast according to Beatrice's recipe, bought a bottle of good wine, which I didn't drink because of my medication, and even baked an apple pie. Hubert noticed these preparations as soon as he entered the house. Wow, Dad, are we having a party? He asked, smelling the cinnamon odor coming from the kitchen. Something like that, I answered evasively. Agatha's first order of business was to look around the house with a critical eye, as usual. Did you change the curtains? She asked, noticing the new curtains in the living room. Yes, the old ones were fading in the sun. How much did the new ones cost? I could hear the disapproval in her voice. Agatha, Hubert said warningly, we had a deal. She pursed her lips but didn't say anything. Apparently, they discussed my spending before the visit. At dinner, I tried to keep the conversation casual, asking Hubert about his work and Agatha about her students. It wasn't until we moved on to dessert and coffee that I decided the moment had come. I have news for you, I began, trying to make my voice sound confident. I've decided to fulfill a long-held dream of going on a cruise in the Caribbean. Hubert raised his eyebrows in surprise, and Agatha froze with a cup of coffee in her hand. A cruise? Hubert asked. That's unexpected. Your mother and I have always wanted to take a trip like this, but we kept putting it off. Now I have the opportunity, and I'm determined not to miss it. Was it because of the money your brother left behind? Agatha asked me directly. Yes, thanks to the inheritance I can afford this trip, I admitted. And I'd like you to come with me. Their faces really stretched in surprise. We? Hubert looked at his wife. But Dad, that's your dream. That I want to share with my family, I finished. I've already booked the cabins on the Caribbean Dream cruise ship. It leaves October 28th from Miami. You've already booked everything? Agatha put the cup on the table with such force that the coffee spilled onto the tablecloth. Without consulting us? I wanted to surprise you, I shrugged, watching her blot the stain with a napkin. That's very generous of you, Dad, Hubert said gently. But October, that's less than 2 months away. I'm not sure I can take a vacation in that time frame. I checked Agatha's school calendar, I said. That's right around the time of fall break. And you said you hadn't taken a vacation in a long time, and your bosses kept reminding you. Hubert looked impressed with my preparation. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I smiled. I had. How much is this cruise worth? Agatha, as usual, went straight to the financial side of things. I'll take care of all the expenses, I answered, deliberately avoiding to name a specific amount. It's my gift to you. Sonny. A very expensive gift, I suppose, Agatha narrowed her eyes. Normand, are you sure it's a wise expenditure of money? Cruises like this cost thousands of dollars. I'm aware of the cost, I said calmly. And yes, I think it's a wise expenditure. Life is too short to keep putting dreams on hold. Life is also unpredictable, Agatha countered. You've received an unexpected inheritance, but that doesn't mean you have to spend all your money on entertainment right away. What if tomorrow you need expensive medical treatment or home repairs? I have good health insurance, and the house is in excellent condition, I countered. Besides, I'm not going to spend all the money. I'd invested most of it on Mr. Preston's advice. Oh yes, the mysterious Mr. Preston. Agatha shook her head skeptically. Who we've never even met. You can meet him if you want, I suggested, though I knew she wouldn't take it. He gave me the impression of a very competent man. Hubert, sensing the tension building, tried to change the subject. Tell me more about the cruise, Dad. What islands will we visit? I looked at my son gratefully. The itinerary includes the Bahamas, Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, and Mexico. We'll have 3 days in the Bahamas and 1 or 2 days each on the other islands. That sounds amazing, Hubert said sincerely. So, I've always wanted to see the Caribbean. Where are we going to live? Agatha asked. What cabins have you booked? For you, a cabin with a window on deck 6, I said. It's a quiet deck, near the restaurants and the pool. And for yourself? I hesitated for a moment. For me, I got a balcony cabin on deck 8. Agatha raised her eyebrows. A balcony? Those are the most expensive cabins after the suites. I wanted to be able to sit outdoors and watch the sea, I explained. It was important to me. And it's not important enough for us? There was a touch of resentment in her voice. Agatha, Hubert intervened again. Papa is paying for the whole trip. I think he has a right to choose the cabin he wants. That's not the point, she objected. The point is that he's spending the money recklessly. A cabin with a balcony costs almost twice as much as a regular cabin. That money could have gone to something more practical. Like what? I asked, feeling the irritation starting to rise in me. Like renovating the bathroom in your house. Or a new car instead of your 15-year-old wreck. Or, she paused meaningfully, for Hubert's down payment on the house. And here was the real reason for her displeasure. The house. Hubert and Agatha had been renting an apartment for 5 years, and Agatha was always talking about buying their own place. But prices in Pittston had risen in recent years, and their savings weren't enough for a down payment. We're not talking about my inheritance, I said firmly. I've decided to spend some of the money on a trip for the whole family. If you don't want to go, I understand. But I'm going anyway. There was an awkward pause. Hubert looked confused, as he always did when he was caught between two fires. Me and my wife. Of course we'll go, Dad, he said at last. Right, Agatha? Agatha pressed her lips together, but nodded. Of course. We appreciate your invitation, Normand. It's just that I'm worried about your financial well-being. I know, I answered, though I really doubted the sincerity of her concern. But believe me, I've given it a lot of thought. The rest of the evening passed in a relatively peaceful atmosphere. We discussed the details of the upcoming trip, what we should take with us, what excursions we could book, how to get to Miami. Agatha even thawed a little when Hubert started showing pictures of the Bahamas on his smartphone. A few days later, however, Agatha called me. Normand, I talked to my cousin Philip about your investment, she began without preamble. I didn't ask you to do that, I remarked. Nevertheless, I think you should meet him. He says that investing in real estate in the Bahamas is very risky. There are constant hurricanes, unstable legislation. Agatha, I appreciate your concern, but I've already made my decision. It's a lot of money, Normand, she said in a persistent tone. You can't just risk it. And this cruise, Philip thinks it's irrational at your age. At my age, I felt a wave of irritation rising. What about my age? I'm not so old that I can't enjoy life. Of course you're not, but you need to think about the future. 5, 10 years from now. That's what I do, I said. Ani, creating memories that will stay with me for those 5 or 10 years. What about financial security? Agatha wouldn't back down. What if you need help? If you spend all the money now, what's left for later? I'm not going to discuss my finances over the phone, I said firmly. And I've already told you I don't plan to spend my entire inheritance on one cruise. But exactly how much are you planning to spend? She insisted. You never gave us a specific amount. Because it doesn't matter, I replied. I can afford it, and that's enough. Normand, you're being irresponsible. This money could provide for your old age, help Hubert buy a house, be a reserve for emergencies. And you're going to blow it on a 2-week trip. Not the whole inheritance, Agatha. Just part of it. But what part? 10%? 20? 50? You have to have a clear financial plan. I have a plan, I said, starting to lose my patience. And I don't have to account to you for every move I make. I'm just trying to help, she said, a touch of hurt in her voice. Hubert and I care about you. I know, I sighed, and I appreciate that, but I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions. After that conversation, I decided to put off discussing the cruise for the time being. Instead, I focused on practical preparations, renewing my passport, buying a new suitcase, ordering some lightweight shirts and shorts. A week later, however, Agatha paid me a surprise visit. She came alone, without Hubert, which in itself was unusual. Normand, I've been talking to a travel agent, she said as soon as she stepped through the door. Doris Kingsley from Travel World. I felt my anxiety rising inside me. Of course, she couldn't know the details of my reservation, but she must have been given general information about the cost of a cruise on the Caribbean Dream. So what did Doris tell you? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. That a 2-week cruise for 3 people in a balcony cabin costs a fortune. Agatha crossed her arms over her chest. It's insanely expensive, Normand. Even if you have money from your inheritance, it's unreasonable. Agatha, I told you before, this is my decision. A decision that affects the whole family. She raised her voice. If you spend this much money now, what's left for the future? For your medical treatment, if you need it? To help Hubert, I'll have enough left over. How do you know that? You haven't even consulted a professional financial advisor. Minus Mr. Preston. Your Mr. Preston is a lawyer, not a financier, she interrupted. Normand, this money could help our whole family. Hubert and I have been saving for a down payment on a house for 5 years. With your help, we could finally stop throwing away money on rent. That's what this is about. It wasn't about my financial well-being. It was about her wanting a piece of the inheritance. Agatha, I'm not going to use the money my brother left me to buy a house for you and Hubert, I said bluntly. It's not what Oliver would want, and it's not what I want. So that's what this is about, she grinned bitterly. You've decided to spend it all on yourself without thinking about your only son. I am thinking of Hubert, I countered. That's why I'm taking you both on the cruise. But I don't have to finance the purchase of your house. Even if it would be the smartest investment, Agatha didn't give up. Think about it. If you help us with the down payment, we can buy a house with an annex for you. You'd live near us, under our supervision. We can help you when you need it. I don't need looking after, I said firmly. I'm not going to move out of my house. Not now, she agreed. But in a few years, when it's harder to walk, when I have memory problems, you have to plan ahead, Normand. When that time comes, we'll discuss options, I said. In the meantime, I want to enjoy life, and the cruise is part of that plan. Agatha looked at me for a long time, as if assessing my resolve. Okay, she said finally. If you insist on this cruise, we'll go. But I think you're making a mistake, spending so much money on a fleeting pleasure instead of investing it in your family's future. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange tension. Hubert called more often than usual, asking how I was feeling, but our conversations were awkward, as if there were an invisible wall between us. Agatha didn't visit me on her usual Tuesday. She'd sent me a message saying she was busy preparing for the new school year. I didn't mind. After our last conversation about the cruise, I needed time to calm down. In that time, I had time to fully prepare for the trip. I gathered the necessary documents, had a medical checkup for travel insurance, and bought new clothes for the tropical climate. On Doris's advice, I booked several excursions in advance. Snorkeling on a coral reef, a visit to a rum plantation in Jamaica, a tour of historical sites in Nassau. The thought of the upcoming trip filled me with an unaccustomed excitement I hadn't experienced in years. On Thursday evening, Doris called me to let me know that the cruise tickets were ready and I could pick them up at the agency. She had also prepared a folder for me with detailed information about the itinerary, excursions, and all the nuances of the cruise, restaurant schedules, entertainment, dress code information for formal dinners. "This is your first cruise, Mr. Curlington," Doris said. "I want everything to go perfectly." The next day, I went to Travel World. Doris greeted me with a smile and handed me a large envelope with the paperwork and tickets. "Everything is ready, Mr. Curlington," she said. "Cruise tickets, Miami hotel reservation confirmations, insurance policies, and all the necessary travel information. I've added some brochures about the Bahamas I think you'll find interesting." I thanked her for her careful preparation and headed home, holding the envelope carefully as if it contained something precious. In a way it did. It contained the tickets to the dream that Beatrice and I had cherished for so long. That evening, I called Hubert. "Son, I've got all the paperwork for our cruise ready. Could you and Agatha come over tomorrow? I want to give you the tickets and discuss the final details." "Sure, Dad," Hubert answered after a short pause. "We'll stop by around 6 o'clock at night, okay?" I agreed and spent the rest of the evening studying the materials Doris had prepared. I was particularly interested in the information about Nassau, the capital of the Bahamas. It was there, according to Mr. Preston, that Oliver's property was located. I made a mental note to see my brother's partner, Mr. Errol Fisher, whom the lawyer had mentioned. The next day I made a light dinner, nothing fancy, just baked fish and vegetables. I didn't want Agatha to take it as an attempt at bribery. At exactly 6 o'clock in the evening, the doorbell rang. Hubert and Agatha looked a little tense as they entered the house. "Come in. I've just set the table." I invited them in. "Oh, you shouldn't have bothered." Agatha glanced around the table. "We won't be long. It's just a light dinner." I tried to lighten the mood. "It's nothing special." Over the meal, we talked about everyday things. Hubert's job, Agatha's new students, the weather, which was unusually warm for mid-September. No one mentioned the cruise as if it were a taboo subject. It wasn't until we finished dinner and moved on to coffee that I decided it was time. "So, I got all the paperwork for our trip," I said, pulling out an envelope that was sitting on the dresser in the living room. "Here are the cruise tickets, Miami hotel information, travel insurance, and tour brochures." I opened the envelope and pulled out 3 sets of documents, laying them out neatly on the table. "These are yours." I handed Hubert and Agatha 2 smaller envelopes. "Here's everything you'll need." Hubert took his envelope with obvious interest, and Agatha took hers with undisguised skepticism. "How much did all this cost?" she asked, looking through the documents. "Agatha," Hubert began warningly, but I held up my hand to stop him. "It's all right," I said. "I understand Agatha's concern. Let's just say it costs less than half of Oliver's inheritance, but more than I've ever spent on a vacation." "So a lot," Agatha shook her head. "And all for a 2-week trip." "For the memories," I corrected, "to fulfill Beatrice's dream, and to spend time with my family." Hubert, sensing the tension building, tried to turn the conversation in a more positive direction. "Dad, I've been looking at pictures of the Caribbean Dream on the internet. It's an amazing liner. It even has a rock climbing wall and an ice rink. And miniature golf," I added, smiling. "And several swimming pools and a theater and a casino." "Casino?" Agatha raised her eyebrows. "I hope you're not going to spend the money on gambling, too." "Of course not," I tried to stay calm. "But there's plenty of entertainment on the ship to suit all tastes." "And everything is included in the price?" Agatha continued to study the documents. "Almost everything," I answered. "High route, meals, most of the entertainment, access to all areas of the ship. Only alcohol, shore excursions, and some special services, like spa treatments, are separate." "And what excursions did you book?" Hubert asked, leafing through the booklet. "A few." I opened my folder and pulled out the confirmation printouts. "Snorkeling in the Bahamas, a tour of Nassau, a visit to a rum plantation in Jamaica." Wait, Agatha interrupted, looking at the papers. You booked all these excursions just for yourself? There's one person listed here. I nodded. I thought you might want to choose other excursions or just relax on the beach. Didn't want to impose my program. Shwainyarham. But I only paid for myself, Agatha asserted rather than asked. I left the money on your cabin key card, I explained. You can choose and pay for any excursions you like. Everything is already included in the total cost of the trip. Agatha continued to look at the paperwork, her face growing more and more disgruntled. So you have a cabin with a balcony on deck 8, and we have a regular cabin with a window on deck 6, she said, not as a question, but as an accusation. Yes, I confirmed, as we'd discussed before. But the price, she jabbed her finger at a figure on one of the documents. Your cabin costs almost twice as much as ours. Agatha, Hubert intervened again. Automatorm, Daddy is paying for the whole trip. It's his choice which cabin to book for himself. That's not the point, she turned to her husband. The point is that he's spending the money recklessly. That money could have gone to something really important. Like what? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Like the down payment on the house we've been talking about for 5 years. Agatha raised her voice. Or for repairs to your house. Or an account for unexpected medical expenses. Anything that would have long-term value, not 2 weeks of fun. This cruise isn't just fun for me. I tried to speak calmly. It's a fulfillment of a promise I made to Beatrice. I hesitated, trying to find the words. It's a way to honor her memory. And you think Beatrice would approve of such a waste? Agatha crossed her arms across her chest. Wasting money that could have helped your son secure a future? Beatrice understood the value of moments, I said. She knew that life is made up of memories, not things. Memories won't keep you warm in your old age, Agatha countered. And they won't pay for your care when you can't take care of yourself. Agatha, Hubert's voice sounded almost pleading. Let's not talk about this now. But Agatha couldn't stop now. No, Hubert, we must talk about it now, she turned to me. Sifo, Normand, you have received an unexpected inheritance. That's wonderful. But you're going to spend a huge amount of money on a whim instead of using it wisely. That's irresponsible. It's my money, I said firmly, and it's my decision how to spend it. A decision that affects the whole family. Agatha was almost shouting. If you spend all the money now, what's left for the future? Who will take care of you when you need help? I'm not going to spend my entire inheritance on one cruise, I repeated what I'd said many times before. And I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. For now, yes, Agatha agreed. But in 5 years? 10 years from now? You have to think ahead, Normand. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. I am thinking ahead, but I also realize that life is short. Beatrice taught me that. We always put this cruise off until later, and in the end, later never came for her. I don't want to make that mistake again. It's selfish, Agatha shook her head. It's selfish to think only of your own desires, without caring about your family's future. Isn't it selfish to demand that I give the money my brother left me to buy a house for you? I couldn't contain my irritation. We're not. Agatha jumped up from her seat. We're just suggesting a more sensible way to use this money. A way that will benefit everyone, including you. Traveling will benefit everyone too, I argued. We'll spend time together, see new places, make memories. Memories! Agatha almost spat out the word. All you're talking about is memories. What about real life, Normand? What about practical needs? The tickets are bought, Agatha. I pointed to the papers on the table. The decision has been made. We leave on October 28th. Agatha fell silent, looking at me with an anger I'd never seen in her eyes before. Then she abruptly grabbed all 3 sets of tickets off the table. No, Normand, her voice was icy. Hubert and I will go. You're not. What? I didn't realize what was happening. You're not going. She held the tickets so I couldn't reach them. You're going to stay home and think about your behavior. Agatha! Hubert looked shocked. What are you doing? What I should have done a long time ago, she said, keeping her eyes on me. Setting boundaries. Normand is acting like an irresponsible child, spending money on stupid things. Someone has to stop him before he squanders his inheritance. I'm not a child, I said slowly. feeling something cold and hard rise up inside me. And you have no right to tell me what to do with my money or my life. I do if your decisions hurt the family, Agatha countered. If you can't act responsibly, someone has to take control of the situation. Agatha, stop it! Hubert stepped between us. Give Daddy the tickets back. It's his money, his decision. No, Hubert, she was adamant. It's not just his decision, it's a decision that affects all of us. And I'm not going to let him throw thousands of dollars away when that money could secure our future. I was staring at her, and suddenly it hit me. All this time, Agatha had been planning to gain control of my finances. Not today, but tomorrow. She would gradually convince me that I was incapable of managing my own money, that I needed her help, and then she would use the money as she saw fit, to buy a house for herself and Hubert, for their needs, not mine. So I decided to do something I'd never done before. I decided to pretend to be defeated. Okay, Agatha, I said, dropping my shoulders in a gesture of defeat. You're right. Maybe I really was too impulsive. Keep the tickets. You and Hubert can go alone. She clearly hadn't expected such an easy victory. Her face showed a look of surprise that quickly changed to one of triumph. You see, Hubert, she said, turning to her husband, Normand himself realizes that I'm right. Huh? Dad? Hubert looked confused. Are you sure? Yes, son, I smiled weakly. Agatha is right. I'm not getting any younger. Maybe this journey's really too tiring for me. You go. Have fun. I'll wait for you here. But it was your dream. Hubert still couldn't believe my sudden surrender. Dreams change, I said. Maybe Agatha was right, and I should use Oliver's money more wisely. Agatha nodded, clearly pleased with my reaction. That's a wise decision, Normand. You'll see it's best for everyone. I'm sure it is, I smiled with deliberate resignation. Now, if you don't mind, I'm a little tired. It's been a long day. Of course. Agatha immediately transformed into a caring daughter-in-law. You should get some rest. We were just leaving. Hubert. My son still looked unsure, but he obediently stood up. Before he left, he gave me a hug. Dad, we can cancel this cruise. We'll stay here with you. No, son, I patted him on the back. Go. Have fun. Bring me back some pictures and souvenirs. When they left, I sat still for a while, staring at the door as it closed. Then I got up, went to the phone and dialed the number of the travel agency. It was almost 8 o'clock in the evening, but I knew Doris was often late for work. Travel World, Doris Kingsley speaking, came her cheerful voice. Doris, this is Normand Curlington, I said. I need to make some changes to our reservation. Of course, Mr. Curlington. What exactly would you like to change? I want to cancel my ticket for the Caribbean Dream Cruise, but keep the reservation for my son and his wife. Oh, she sounded disappointed. I'm sorry to hear that. May I know the reason? Maybe we can find a solution. The reason is personal, I answered evasively, but I have another request. Go ahead. I would like to book a separate flight to the Bahamas, to Nassau for about the same dates when the cruise ship will be there, and a nice hotel for a week. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Minus Mr. Curlington, if it's no secret, what's going on? Doris finally asked. I sighed. Doris was a professional, and I needed her help. Perhaps a little candor wouldn't hurt. You see, Doris, my sister-in-law, doesn't approve of me spending money on a trip. She thinks it's too wasteful at my age. I see, she said, a note of sympathy in her voice. And you've decided to give in? On the surface, yes, I admitted. But really, I'm just planning a different itinerary. I want to be in the Bahamas at the same time they are. To surprise them. Surprise. Oh, Doris was silent for a moment. That's a rather unusual request. I understand. If you're uncomfortable... No, she said quickly. I'll help you. Let me check the schedule of the Caribbean Dream. Okay, they arrive in Nassau on November 1st and stay until November 3rd. I can arrange your flight so that you arrive there on, say, October 31st. That will give you time to settle in before they arrive. Perfect, I felt a warmth spilling inside me. And if possible, I'd like to book a room at a hotel near the port where the cruise ship will be docked. Sure, I could almost see Doris smiling on the other end of the line. There are some great options. Atlantis is the most luxurious, but also the most expensive. Breeze Bay is more affordable, but also very comfortable, and it just happens to overlook the harbor. Breeze Bay sounds great, I said. Okay, Doris tapped on the keyboard. I'll book your room from October 31st through November 5th. That will give you plenty of time both before and after their visit. Thank you, Doris. I really appreciate your help. You're welcome, Mr. Curlington, she replied sincerely. You know, I've worked in tourism for 20 years now, and I often see people put their dreams on hold. Someday, next year, when there's more money, and then it turns out that the time is gone. I'm glad you're not giving up on your dream. Me too, I said quietly. Me too. After talking to Doris, I sat down and wrote a short letter to Mr. Preston, informing him of my changed plans. I asked him to contact Oliver's partner, Mr. Fisher, and arrange for us to meet in Nassau on the 1st or 2nd of November. I then called my bank and arranged to have additional funds transferred to my credit card, just in case. There was no telling what other surprises awaited me in the Bahamas. Finished with my business, I poured myself a small glass of whiskey, a rare luxury I allowed myself on special occasions. Sitting in the chair by the window, I looked at the stars and thought of Beatrice. Would she approve of my plan? I suppose so. Beatrice had always said that sometimes you had to be firm, especially when it came to protecting something you cared about. And this cruise wasn't just a trip for me, it was a promise I made to her and to myself. I wasn't going to let Agatha steal that dream from me. Not now, not ever. For the first time in a long time, I felt a determination in me that reminded me of a young Norman, someone who wasn't afraid to go his own way, who believed in himself. And that feeling felt good, right? I knew my plan was risky, knew Agatha would be furious when she saw me in the Bahamas. But honestly, I didn't care about that anymore. It was time to stop worrying about what others thought and start living my life the way I saw fit. With that thought in mind, I raised my glass in a silent toast to the stars, to Beatrice, and to what was yet to come. The flight from Philadelphia to Nassau took a little over 3 hours. All that time I stared out the window, watching the color of the ocean change from steel gray off the coast of America to the incredible turquoise of the Bahamas. As the plane began to descend, I saw white beaches fringed with palm trees and colorful houses scattered over green hills. It was like a picture from a tourist brochure, only real and alive. We landed at exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon local time. The Linden Pindling Airport in Nassau turned out to be small, but modern. There was music everywhere, soft Caribbean rhythms creating a party atmosphere. Customs officials smiled and joked with passengers. It was so different from the seriousness and tension of American airports. After going through all the formalities, I went to the arrivals hall where a driver with a Curlington sign was waiting for me. Doris took care of everything, including the transfer to the hotel. Welcome to the Bahamas, sir. The driver, a tall man with a wide smile, greeted me. My name is Malcolm. I'll take you to Breeze Bay. On the way from the airport, Malcolm proved to be a great tour guide, talking about local attractions, island history, and the best restaurants in Nassau. I looked out the window at the scenery passing by and couldn't believe I was finally here in the Caribbean that Beatrice and I had dreamed of for so long. First time in the Bahamas, sir? Malcolm asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. Yes, it is, I answered. My brother had been here often, though. He even had a business on the island. Really? Malcolm raised his eyebrows interestedly. What kind of business, if you don't mind me asking? Tourist business, as far as I know. Something to do with excursions and yacht charters. His name was Oliver Curlington. Malcolm thought for a moment. Curlington. That sounds familiar. I'm not sure, but I think I've heard of a company called Curlington's Caribbean Adventures. They organize tours for cruise ship guests. Maybe that's it, I nodded. My brother passed away recently, and I inherited his business. I haven't gotten into all the details yet, though. I'm sorry for your loss, sir, Malcolm said sincerely. Thank you. We haven't been particularly close in recent years, but it's still strange to be here where he spent so much time. The Breeze Bay Hotel lived up to its name. Perched on a small hill overlooking Nassau Harbor, it was a complex of several 2- and 3-story colonial-style buildings surrounded by lush tropical gardens. My room was on the 2nd floor of the main building and had a balcony with a beautiful view of the sea and harbor. After checking in, I rested for a few hours, getting used to the new time zone, and acclimatizing to the heat and humidity, which were unusual after the cool Pennsylvania autumn. In the evening, I had dinner at the hotel restaurant, enjoying the local cuisine, the freshest seafood, exotic fruits, and the famous Bahamian rum cake for dessert. The following morning, I decided to explore Nassau. The city proved to be a charming mix of colonial architecture, modern buildings, and a typically Caribbean atmosphere. I strolled down Bay Street, the main street full of stores, restaurants, and souvenir stores. I visited a straw market where local artisans were selling traditional Bahamian hats, bags, and other items woven from palm leaves. After lunch, I decided it was time to get down to business. Mr. Preston had arranged my meeting with Oliver's partner, Errol Fisher, for this afternoon at 3 o'clock. The meeting was to take place at the offices of Curlington's Caribbean Adventures in Parliament Street. The office was located in a beautiful two-story colonial building painted pale pink. On the first floor was a tourist center with bright posters advertising various excursions: snorkeling and scuba diving, boat trips, fishing in the open sea, visiting deserted islands. The young woman behind the receptionist's desk escorted me to the second floor where the management offices were located. Errol Fisher was waiting for me in a spacious office with panoramic windows overlooking the harbor. Minus Mr. Curlington, he rose from his desk as I entered. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." Errol was a tall, slender man in his 50s, with close-cropped, graying hair and the weathered face of a man who spent a lot of time outdoors. His handshake was firm, and his smile was genuine. "Minus Mr. Fisher," I shook the outstretched hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me. Please call me Errol." He pointed to the chair across from his desk. "Have a seat. Can I get you something to drink? Coffee, tea, or maybe something cold? It's a hot day." "An iced tea would be nice," I said, settling into the comfortable chair. Errol pressed a button on the intercom and asked the secretary to bring the drinks. "So," he began when we were alone, "Mr. Preston has informed me of Oliver's death. It's sad news. We were partners for almost 15 years. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said. "I have to admit, my brother and I hadn't spoken in 20 years. I didn't even know about his business here in the Bahamas." Errol nodded understandingly. Oliver didn't like to talk about his life in the States. He'd come here in the early 2000s after some kind of disillusionment with business in America. Never gave any details. We met on a fishing trip, got to talking, and he mentioned he was looking for a new business. I already had a small company organizing excursions for tourists. Oliver suggested expanding the business to include yacht rentals and fishing tours. He invested money, I invested knowledge and connections. And so Curlington's Caribbean Adventures was born. And was it a success? "More than successful," Errol smiled. "We started with one small boat and an office the size of a pantry. Now we have a fleet of 12 boats of various sizes, from small boats to luxury yachts, and we organize excursions for the guests of all the cruise ships that visit Nassau." There was a knock on the door, and the secretary brought in a tray of drinks and light snacks. Errol thanked her and continued when we were alone. "Oliver was a good businessman, tough, sometimes even ruthless, but honest with his partners. We never argued about money." I sipped my iced tea, refreshing, with a slight flavor of mint and lemon. "Minus Mr. Preston told me that I inherited his share of the business in Oliver's will. I must confess, I have no experience in the travel industry and have no plans to move to the Bahamas, so I'm not sure I'll be of much use to the company." Errol nodded understandingly. Oliver had foreseen this situation. "There's a clause in our partnership agreement that allows one of us to buy out the other in the event of the other's death or inability to continue in business. If you prefer, I'm willing to buy out Oliver's share at market value." "That sounds reasonable," I agreed. "But first, I'd like to better understand what exactly I've inherited. Did Mr. Preston also mention the property on the island?" "Citoyenne." "Yes, the Côte d'Azur Villa," Errol nodded. "It's a beautiful place on the west coast, about 20 minutes from here. Oliver bought it about 10 years ago and completely renovated it. He used it both for his personal residence and for hosting important clients." "I'd like to see this villa," I said. "Of course, I can organize a trip there tomorrow, if it's convenient for you." By the way, Oliver also owned a small private island near Nassau. Tiny, only a few acres, but with a beautiful beach and a small bungalow. He called it his refuge from the world. I was impressed. Oliver seemed to be doing really well. This all sounds, more expensive than I expected, I admitted. I thought I'd inherited a small business and maybe an apartment. Errol grinned. Oliver always knew how to make money, and he knew how to live large. But the business had really thrived, especially in recent years, when cruise tourism in the Bahamas has boomed. We talked about the details of the business for a while longer. Errol showed me financial reports for the last few years, told me about the company's development plans, competitors, and prospects. Everything looked impressive. When our business conversation came to an end, Errol suddenly changed the subject. Norman, if you don't mind, there is a delicate matter I would like to discuss. Of course, I said warily. What is it? Errol was silent for a moment, as if searching for words. About a month ago, I was contacted by a woman who introduced herself as your sister-in-law, Agatha Curlington. She said she was acting on your behalf under a power of attorney. I felt a chill go down my spine. Agatha contacted you. About what? She claimed you wanted to sell all your real estate and business interests in the Bahamas. Errol watched my reaction carefully. She said you were having health problems and had decided to liquidate your assets so that the funds would be available for your treatment. That's an absolute lie, I said firmly. I hadn't given Agatha any power of attorney, and I wasn't planning to sell Oliver's inheritance, especially since I didn't even know how valuable it was until I got here. That's what I thought, Errol nodded. Something about her story sounded implausible, so I contacted Mr. Preston to verify the information. And what did he say? That he'd never issued any documents in the name of Agatha Curlington, and that, as far as he knew, you were in good health. Thank God, I breathed. Errol, what exactly did she want to sell? Everything, he said. The villa, the island, her share in the company, and at a price far below market value, insisting that the deal be finalized quickly. Iku, did she send any documents? I asked, feeling my anger rising. Yes. Errol opened a desk drawer and pulled out a folder. A power of attorney, supposedly notarized, a medical report on your condition, and even a letter, supposedly written by you, explaining your decision to sell. He handed me a folder. I opened it and saw the documents with a forged signature. The power of attorney looked almost real if you didn't know what my real signature looked like. The medical report was on Pittston Hospital letterhead and diagnosed early-stage dementia with periods of confusion. The signature of the doctor, Dr. Wilson, was unfamiliar to me. But what struck me most was my letter. It was written on a computer, but signed by hand. A pretty good imitation of my signature. In the letter, I explained my decision to sell Oliver's entire inheritance as a necessity to pay for expensive medical treatment and a desire to secure my family's future. It's unbelievable, I looked up at Errol. She forged all those documents and tried to sell property I didn't even know I owned. Fortunately, I decided to verify the information before taking any action, Errol said. But that's not what worries me. If she went to such lengths to gain control of your inheritance, what else could she do, I wondered. Really, if Agatha is capable of forging legal and medical documents to get her hands on the money, what else is she capable of? Especially now that she knows her plan has failed? Errol, doesn't she know you've been in contact with Mr. Preston? I asked. Known by the. I told her I was considering the offer and needed time to make it legally clear. She was persistent, but I postponed the decision until you arrived. Okay, I nodded. Let's keep it quiet for now. I want to surprise her. Errol looked at me carefully. Norman, what your daughter-in-law has done is not just a family conflict. It's forgery and attempted fraud, a criminal offense. I understand, I said. Arian, and believe me, I'm not going to let it go without consequences. But first I want to see the look on her face when she realizes her plan has been discovered. What do you mean? My son and daughter-in-law are arriving here on a cruise ship day after tomorrow, I explained. They think I'm staying in Pittston. Agatha practically forbade me to go by taking my ticket. I pretended to agree with that, but secretly organized a separate trip. Errol smiled slowly. I see. You want to surprise her. Exactly, I nodded. And now, thanks to you, I know much more about her true intentions. That makes this meeting even more interesting. What can I do to help? Errol asked. I thought for a moment. You said your company organizes excursions for cruise ship guests? Yes, that's our main source of income. Then here's what we're going to do. Errol and I have devised a plan. My son and Agatha will probably want to tour Nassau when they arrive. Curlington's Caribbean Adventures was the cruise company's exclusive partner in organizing excursions on the island. Errol could easily find out what tours they had booked and ensure that I could casually meet them in town. He also offered to set up a temporary office for me in the company's building, where I could meet Agatha if she decided to continue her efforts to sell my inheritance. Shortfilm. You know, Norman, said Errol, when we had finished discussing the details, Oliver would be pleased. He always said you were smarter than he was, just too decent to take advantage of it. He said that? I was surprised. Yes, especially in the last year. When he found out he was ill, he reminisced a lot about the past. You, your parents, growing up in Pittston. He was sorry he'd lost touch with you. I felt a lump come up in my throat. All these years I'd thought Oliver had forgotten I existed, immersed in his new life. Thank you for telling me about this, I said quietly. You're welcome, Errol stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. I'm glad I finally met you, Norman. Oliver was right. You really are a lot like him, only wiser. After leaving the office of Curlington's Caribbean Adventures, I took a long walk along the Nassau waterfront, trying to make sense of everything I'd learned. Oliver's inheritance was much larger than I'd realized, and Agatha had somehow found out before I did, devising a plan to seize control of the entire estate. Forging documents, lying about my health, trying to quickly sell everything my brother had left me. This went far beyond a simple family quarrel or a disagreement over money. It was betrayal in its purest form, and worst of all, I didn't even know how involved Hubert was. Did my son know of his wife's plans? Or was he as much a victim of her manipulations as I was? Either way, in 2 days I would learn the truth. When the Caribbean Dream docks in the port of Nassau, Agatha will get her surprise. The morning of November 1st was clear and windless. It was perfect Bahamian weather. Bright sunshine, turquoise skies without a single cloud, a light breeze bringing the scent of the sea and exotic flowers. I was standing on the balcony of my room at the Breeze Bay Hotel, sipping freshly squeezed pineapple juice and watching Nassau Harbor. Somewhere out there on the high seas, the Caribbean Dream was approaching the island. According to the schedule Errol had shown me, the cruise ship was scheduled to dock at 10 o'clock in the morning. Passengers were allowed to go ashore from 11 to 23 in the evening, after which the ship would depart for its next destination, Coco Cay Island. Last night, Errol and I finalized our plan of action. Curlington's Caribbean Adventures was organizing several excursions for Caribbean Dream passengers, including a sightseeing tour of Nassau. Errol checked the reservation list and found that Hubert and Agatha had signed up for this particular excursion. Perfect for my surprise. In addition, through his connections in the travel business, Errol found out that Agatha had made an appointment with a local realtor named Jeffrey Parker for 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the Blue Lagoon restaurant on Bay Street. Parker was known as a specialist in selling luxury real estate to foreigners. At 9:30, I went down to the hotel lobby where Errol was already waiting for me. He was dressed in a white shirt and light-colored pants, the standard uniform of the guides at Curlington's Caribbean Adventures. Good morning, Norman, he greeted me. Ready for the big day? As ready as I can be, I grinned nervously. I admit I'm a little nervous. It's understandable, Errol patted my shoulder. It's not every day you get to surprise your relatives like this. Come on, I'll show you a good place where you can watch the liner arrive. We got into his Jeep and drove to the harbor. Errol parked on a hill where we had a great view of the harbor and its approaches. From here, we could see the huge cruise ships coming into Nassau Harbor. There she is, Errol pointed to the horizon where the silhouette of a large white ship appeared. The Caribbean Dream. I pulled out the binoculars I had brought with me and pointed them at the approaching liner. It was an impressive sight. A huge, gleaming white ship, like a floating city, slowly and majestically entered the harbor. I tried to imagine where Hubert and Agatha were, probably on one of the decks, admiring the view of the approaching island. Well, Errol said, looking at his watch, it's time to move toward the terminal. Passengers will start disembarking about an hour after we dock. We walked down to the harbor and took up a position close to the cruise terminal where we had a good view of the passenger exit. Errol introduced me to several of his staff who were to meet the tourists for the sightseeing tour. "This is Mr. Norman Curlington, Oliver's brother and our new partner," he said as he introduced me. "He wants to see how our company works, so today he'll be overseeing the welcome process." No one asked too many questions. Nassau was used to eccentric rich tourists and businessmen. At precisely 11 o'clock, the passengers began disembarking. People disembarked in groups, many taking pictures against the backdrop of the port and colorful Bahamian buildings. The guides from Curlington Caribbean Adventures greeted them with signs indicating the names of the excursions. I watched the stream of tourists carefully, trying to spot Hubert and Agatha. Finally, they appeared. Hubert, in a light-colored shirt and shorts, with a camera around his neck, obviously excited and happy. Agatha, in a strict white dress and wide-brimmed hat, with a large bag over her shoulder, focused and businesslike even on vacation. They approached the girl with the sign Nassau Sightseeing Tour, showed their boarding passes and joined the group of tourists. I stepped back into the shadows, not wanting to be seen early. Errol stayed with me. "The sightseeing tour will take about 2 hours," he explained. "First, there's a van ride to the main sites, Fort Charlotte, the Water Tower, the Government House, then a walking tour of Old Town, including the Pirate Museum and Straw Market. At the end, free time for shopping on Bay Street. And that's where, I assume, Agatha plans to separate from the group to meet with the realtor?" I asked. "Probably," Errol nodded. "The Blue Lagoon is at the very end of Bay Street, about a 5-minute walk from where the tour ends." "Okay," I took a deep breath. "So we have 2 hours to get ready for the meeting." Errol and I went to the office of Curlington's Caribbean Adventures, where I could wait quietly for the group of tourists, including Hubert and Agatha, to finish the sightseeing tour. Errol offered me a cup of excellent Bahamian coffee and fresh fruit, but I was too excited to eat. "Nervous?" Errol asked, watching me walk around the office. "A little," I admitted. "It's not every day you expose your sister-in-law for attempted fraud." "I'm sure it'll go well," Errol tried to cheer me up. "The important thing is to stay calm." I nodded, though I was seething with a mixture of emotions, angry, frustrated, strangely excited about the confrontation ahead. For 20 years, I'd been giving in, avoiding conflict, letting others make decisions for me. Today, that would end. At 1:30, we pulled up in front of the Blue Lagoon. The restaurant was on the second floor of an old colonial-era building and had a terrace overlooking the harbor. Errol had reserved a table for me in the corner of the terrace, where I had an excellent view of the entire room, but where I was not particularly visible. "I'll go meet the group after the tour is over," Errol said. "I'll check to see if your sister-in-law is really on her way here. If anything changes, I'll let you know." "Thank you, Errol," I shook his hand, "for everything." He left, and I ordered myself an iced tea and waited. The time dragged painfully slow. I looked at the other customers in the restaurant, mostly tourists enjoying seafood and exotic cocktails, and thought about how my life would change after today. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a well-dressed man in his 40s, dark-skinned, wearing a light-colored linen suit and carrying a leather briefcase, entered the restaurant. He looked around the room, then walked to the bar and ordered a drink. I assumed he was Jeffrey Parker, the realtor with whom Agatha had made the appointment. 10 minutes later, Agatha appeared on the doorstep of the restaurant. She was alone without Hubert. That didn't surprise me. She had probably told her son she wanted to rest or go shopping and had gone to a business meeting. Agatha took a quick look around the room and headed toward the bar, where Parker was already waiting for her. They shook hands, and then the realtor escorted her to a table by the window. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I saw Parker take some papers out of his briefcase and spread them out in front of Agatha. I decided it was time to intervene. Finishing my tea, I left the money on the table and slowly made my way to their table. Agatha was sitting with her back to me, staring intently at the papers Parker was showing her. The realtor was the first to notice my approach and frowned slightly, clearly not expecting an intruder. "Good afternoon," I said, stopping at their table. "Am I interrupting?" Agatha turned around sharply and her face changed instantly. First there was bewilderment, then shock, and finally a look of ill-concealed horror. Normand?" she stuttered, unable to believe her eyes. "But how? You're in Pittston." As you can see, I'm not. I smiled my most unpleasant smile. I'm in the Bahamas. So are you. I don't understand. Agatha quickly pulled herself together. How did you end up here? Oh, it's a long story. I turned to the realtor, who was watching our exchange of remarks with curiosity. And you must be Mr. Parker? Jeffrey Parker of Bahamas Real Estate? Yes, he nodded cautiously. And you are? Norman Curlington. I extended my hand to him. The owner of Villa Azure in Little Oasis Island, which I understand my sister-in-law is planning to sell without my knowledge. Parker turned pale and cast a quick glance at Agatha. Mrs. Curlington said she was acting under your power of attorney, he said. She has all the necessary documents. Forged, I interrupted him. All these documents are forgeries. I never gave my daughter-in-law a power of attorney to sell the property. Moreover, before I came here, I didn't even know exactly what I inherited from my brother. That's a lie. Agatha jumped up from his seat. Normand is suffering from the early stages of dementia. I have a medical report. Oh, also forge, I remain calm. You can check with Pittston Hospital. Dr. Wilson, whose signature is on that report, doesn't exist there. Parker looked increasingly concerned. He started gathering documents from his desk. I think we need to clear this up before we proceed, he said. If there is any doubt about the authenticity of the power of attorney, there is no doubt, I was adamant. The power of attorney is fake, and you can easily verify that by contacting my lawyer, Mr. Preston of Philadelphia, or my brother's partner, Errol Fisher of Curlington's Caribbean Adventures. Agatha's face contorted with rage and fear. You've met Fisher? Her voice trembled. Of course, I nodded. He showed me all the documents you sent him. Very impressive forgeries, I must admit, especially my signature. How long have you been practicing? Parker, clearly feeling uncomfortable, got up from the table. I think you two need to settle family matters privately, he said. I'll contact you later when the situation is clearer. Don't bother, I said. I have no plans to sell any real estate in the Bahamas. Not now, not in the foreseeable future. The realtor nodded, threw an apologetic look at Agatha, and quickly left the restaurant. It was just the two of us. How did you end up here? Agatha asked, her voice quiet but full of rage. You should have stayed in Pittston. Because you decided to? I grinned. Because you took my ticket and claimed I wasn't going? I'm sorry to disappoint you, Agatha, but I'm no longer a child to be ordered around. You're an old stubborn fool, she hissed, spending money on stupid things when you could be helping your own son. No, Agatha, I shook my head. A fool is someone who forges documents and tries to sell someone else's property illegally. Do you know what that's called? Fraud. A criminal offense. She turned even paler. You wouldn't dare, she whispered. You wouldn't dare go to the police. I would if I had to, I said firmly. But first I want to talk to Hubert. Does he know about your schemes? Leave Hubert alone, her voice trembled. He knows nothing. Does he? I looked at her carefully. He doesn't know that his wife is forging documents and trying to sell his father's estate? That she's representing me as an incapacitated old man with dementia? I was doing this for us! Agatha was almost screaming. For our future. Do you realize how much that damn island and villa are worth? Millions. Millions that you're going to spend on cruises and other stupid things instead of helping your own son. It's not about money, Agatha. I shook my head. It's about trust and respect. You don't respect me. You don't respect my decisions and my right to control my life and my money. Instead of just talking to me, you chose to go behind my back, to deceive me. You wouldn't have agreed anyway. She crossed her arms over her chest. You're too stubborn. Maybe, I agreed. But it would have been my decision, not yours. At that moment, Hubert came up to the restaurant terrace. He looked anxious and out of breath, as if he'd been running. Agatha, he called out, looking around. Agatha, are you here? Then he saw us and stood still, not believing his eyes. Dad? He blinked several times as if trying to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. What are you doing here? Hi, son, I smiled. Surprise. Hubert came over to our table, shifting his puzzled gaze from me to Agatha and back again. I don't understand, he said. You stayed home. How did you end up in the Bahamas? I flew separately, I explained. After Agatha took my cruise ticket, I decided to organize my own trip. But why? Hubert looked genuinely puzzled. You could have just said you wanted to go. We would have found a way. That's not the point, son, I sighed. Sit down. We need to have a serious talk. Hubert lowered himself uncertainly into the chair. Agatha stood beside him, pale and tense as a string. About what? Hubert asked. No, about your wife trying to sell the real estate I inherited from Oliver, I said bluntly, using a fake power of attorney and a fake medical report that I was incapacitated. Hubert stared at me, then at Agatha, clearly not understanding what I was saying. What? What real estate? What power of attorney? He shook his head. Dad, I don't understand anything. Tell him, Agatha. I looked at my sister-in-law. Tell him about Villa Côte d'Azur and Little Oasis, about how you contacted Errol Fisher, Oliver's partner, and tried to sell my share of their business, about how you forged my signature on documents. Hubert's face grew more shocked with every word I said. Agatha, son, he turned to his wife. Is it true? I did it for us, she repeated, but without the same confidence. For our future. Think, Hubert, how much all this real estate is worth. We could buy the house we've always dreamed of, save for retirement, for the education of the children we'll have one day. By forging documents? Hubert shook his head, not believing his ears. Representing my father as incompetent? That's a crime, Agatha. I would have legalized it later, she tried to justify herself. When the money was already in our account, no one would have been hurt. Except me, I pointed out. Except for my reputation and my right to control my own property. Hubert covered his face with his hands, clearly shocked by the truth. I can't believe it, he muttered. All this time, you've been planning this behind my back? Behind my father's back? You wouldn't understand, Agatha put her hand on his shoulder, but Hubert pulled away sharply. You're too soft like your father. Sometimes you have to be decisive. Decisive? Hubert raised his eyes to her, full of pain and anger. You call forging documents and attempted fraud decisive action? It's a crime, Agatha. I did it for us, she repeated a third time, but now her voice sounded almost desperate. No, Hubert stood up. You did it for you, for your obsession to control everything and everyone around you, including me and my father. He turned to me. Dad, I swear, I didn't know anything about this. I would never. I believe you, son. I put my hand on his shoulder. I know you wouldn't do something like that. What now? Hubert asked, looking at me anxiously. Will you go to the police? I wondered. Part of me wanted to punish Agatha to the full extent of the law, but another part of me realized that a trial would only exacerbate the rift in the family. It's up to Agatha, I finally said. If she admits her guilt, stops trying to interfere in my affairs, and makes a written commitment never to try to manipulate my finances or property again, maybe we can work this out without involving the authorities. Agatha looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and relief. You're not going to go to the police? I don't want to create a bigger scandal, I said, but keep in mind that Errol Fisher has all the documents you forged, and my lawyer, Mr. Preston, has copies. If you ever try anything like that again, that evidence will be in the hands of the authorities immediately. Agatha nodded silently, her eyes downcast. It was the first time I'd seen her truly submissive since I'd known her. Hubert, I turned to my son, I've made a reservation at a nice restaurant on the coast. Why don't we have dinner together tonight? I'll tell you all about Oliver's inheritance. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there. Sure, Dad, Hubert smiled weakly. I'd really like that. What about me? Agatha asked quietly. Hubert and I looked at each other. It's up to you, son, I said. It's your wife. Hubert looked at Agatha for a long time, then sighed. You can come with us, he said at last, but we have a very serious conversation to have. Later, in private. Agatha nodded, clearly realizing that she wasn't getting off easy. One more thing, I added. Tomorrow morning we'll meet Errol Fisher at the offices of Curlington's Caribbean Adventures. You'll sign a statement admitting that all the documents you gave him were forgeries and that you acted without my knowledge or consent. That will be my insurance for the future. Agatha nodded again without looking up. Okay, then it's settled. I got up from the table. I'll meet you at 7 o'clock tonight in the lobby of your cruise ship. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to show Hubert the Côte d'Azur villa. You'd be surprised, son. What a beautiful place Oliver left us. The three of us left the restaurant, but the atmosphere between us had changed forever. Agatha walked a little behind us, immersed in her own thoughts, perhaps realizing for the first time the consequences of her actions. Hubert looked shaken and broken, like a man whose world had just been turned upside down. And I felt strangely relieved. For the first time in years, I was taking control of the situation, not letting others decide for me. It was frightening and uplifting at the same time. I wonder what Beatrice would say if she saw me now. I think she'd be proud. She always said there was a hidden power in me that I just didn't dare to use. Maybe she was right. Maybe sometimes it takes a real crisis to realize what you're really capable of. The rest of the day passed like a blur. I showed Hubert the Côte d'Azur villa and the small private island that I now owned. My son was amazed, walking around the rooms with his mouth open, touching the marble countertops, looking out at the vast ocean from the terrace, saying, "I can't believe Uncle Oliver owned all this." Agatha kept to herself, unusually quiet and depressed. Not once did she speak her mind, or give advice, or try to take control of the situation. Several times I caught her gaze, a mixture of fear, distrust, and ill-concealed dislike. She obviously hadn't expected me to be capable of such a decisive step, and now she was overestimating her possibilities with me. In the evening, we had dinner at the Coral Reef restaurant on the ocean. I told Hubert all about Oliver's inheritance, about the company, Caribbean Adventures of Curlington, about the villa and the island, about the letter that my brother left me before his death. "Why didn't you tell us about this before?" Hubert asked. "When you first received the news of the inheritance?" "Because I did not know all the details myself," I answered honestly. Minus Mr. Preston had only told me that there was some property in the Bahamas. I didn't realize how valuable it was until I came here and met Errol. "How did Agatha know about it before you did?" Hubert glanced at his wife, who was silently picking at her salad without looking up. "That's a good question." I looked at Agatha too. "I'm curious too." Agatha finally looked up. "I was going through your mail," she said quietly. "I found a letter from Mr. Preston and called him, pretending to be your assistant. He told me about some real estate in the Bahamas, and I decided to look into it." "You went through my mail?" I shook my head. "Agatha, there's such a thing as privacy. Have you ever heard of it?" She didn't answer, lowering her eyes again. "Doesn't matter, Mon," I said, deciding not to pursue the subject over dinner. "The important thing is that now all the cards are laid bare. I know about the inheritance. I know about Agatha's attempt to sell it without my knowledge, and now we can move on." "And how do you plan to dispose of it all?" Hubert asked. "And it's a huge fortune, Dad." "I know," I nodded. "To be honest, I haven't made up my mind yet. Errol's offered to buy out Oliver's share of the company, and I'll probably take it. I don't think I'd make a good tourist manager, especially from a distance. But the villa and the island? I don't know. Maybe I'll keep it. It's beautiful here. Your mom and I always wanted a place by the ocean." "It would be a very expensive investment," Hubert said. "Yes, but the returns are good," I said. "Real estate in the Bahamas goes up in value every year. Besides, I could rent out the villa when I'm not using it myself." "Do you plan to use it?" Hubert sounded surprised. "Do you want to move to the Bahamas?" "Not move to the Bahamas," I smiled, "but spending a couple months a year here, especially in the winter, when it's cold and snowy in Pittston." "Why not? Why not?" "That would be wonderful, Dad." Hubert smiled too. "You deserve a vacation in a good climate. And you could come and visit," I added. "There are 6 bedrooms in the villa, plenty of room. We could fish, swim, explore the islands." "I'd like that very much," Hubert said sincerely. I noticed that he didn't include Agatha in these plans, talking only about himself. Apparently, the exposure of her machinations had taken a serious toll on their relationship. After dinner, we returned to the cruise ship. I insisted on seeing them off. Hubert offered to move me from the hotel to the ship, telling me I could buy an extra ticket for the rest of the cruise, but I declined. "I still have things to do on the island," I explained. "I need to meet Errol, sign some papers. Maybe next time." We agreed to meet the next morning at the office of Curlington's Caribbean Adventures so Agatha could sign the confession of forgery as we had agreed earlier. Back at the hotel, I lay awake for a long time pondering the day's events. Things hadn't quite happened the way I'd planned. I'd expected more resistance from Agatha, more attempts to justify herself or get out of it. Her almost instant surrender was unexpected. Perhaps she simply realized she'd lost and decided to minimize the damage. Or did she have some other plan that I didn't realize? In the morning, I met Errol in his office an hour before my scheduled meeting with Hubert and Agatha. We discussed the details of the upcoming conversation and prepared a document for Agatha to sign. "Are you sure you don't want to go to the police?" Errol asked. "What your daughter-in-law did is a serious crime." "I'm sure," I nodded. "It would only complicate things. Besides, I don't want to hurt Hubert. He's not to blame for his wife's actions." "I understand," Errol sighed. "But be careful. People capable of such deceit rarely change." "I'll be on my guard," I assured him, "and I'll have your document as insurance." At precisely 10 o'clock, Hubert and Agatha entered the office. My son looked tired, as if he had been up all night. Agatha was pale and tense, but she held her dignity. "Good morning," Errol greeted them. "Please have a seat." We settled around the conference table. Errol placed a document in front of Agatha. "This is a statement confirming that all the documents you provided earlier were forged without the knowledge and consent of Mr. Norman Curlington," he explained. "Read it carefully, and if you agree, sign it." Agatha glanced quickly over the text, then took the pen and signed without a word of objection. That surprised me again. Then she handed the document to Errol and asked, "Is that all?" "Almost," I answered. "I need your promise that you will never again interfere in my financial affairs or try to manipulate my assets." "I promise," she said in a steady voice, "and that you'll stop treating me like an incapacitated old man who can't make his own decisions." "I promise," she repeated. "Good," I nodded. "Then we'll call it a night." "No, we're not," Agatha said, her voice hardening. "I admit that I was wrong, that I went behind your back and tried to sell your property without authorization. It was, unacceptable. I apologize. I was stunned." Agatha had never apologized to me before, never admitted her mistakes. "But I want you to understand," she continued, looking me straight in the eye. "I didn't do it out of spite. I didn't do it to hurt you. I really thought it was the best thing for everyone. For you, for Hubert, for our family. Best for everyone." I shook my head. "Make me look crazy? Take away my control over my own life?" "I never thought you were crazy," Agatha said. "But you're getting older, Norman. Sooner or later, you're going to need help. And I wanted to make sure we had the means to give you the best care when that time came. If you were really worried about my future, you could have just talked to me," I said, openly and honestly. "Instead of forging documents and going behind my back." "You're right," she agreed abruptly. "I chose the wrong path, and I admit it. But my intentions were not evil, Norman. Please believe that." I stared at her for a long time, trying to figure out if she was sincere or just another manipulation. In the end, I decided to give her a chance to save face. "Okay, Agatha," I said. "I believe you didn't mean to hurt me, but trust is a fragile thing. It's easy to break and very hard to rebuild. It will take time before I can trust you again." "I understand," she nodded, "and I'm willing to work at it, for Hubert's sake, for our family." That concluded the formal part of our meeting. We said goodbye to Errol and went outside. The day was clear and warm, typical Bahamian weather. "What are you going to do next?" I asked Hubert. "Do you still have time before we sail?" A few hours," he nodded. "The ship leaves at 5 o'clock in the evening." "Then maybe we could have dinner together," I suggested. "There's a great restaurant not far from here, right on the beach." Hubert looked at Agatha as if asking her permission, and I realized that some habits don't change overnight. "Actually," Agatha said suddenly, "I think you two should have lunch together." "Yeah, I'd better get back to the ship. I need to pack, and I need some time to think." Hubert looked surprised but nodded. "All right, if you're sure." "I'm sure," she smiled weakly. "You two need to talk. Without me." She kissed Hubert on the cheek, nodded to me, and walked away toward the harbor. My son and I followed her with a glance. "She's changed a lot in the last 24 hours, I remarked. "Yes," Hubert agreed. We had a long talk last night. All night, in fact. I've never seen her so broken. Broken? I was surprised. She didn't look broken. Not now, Hubert shook his head. She's pulled herself together. But yesterday, she was crying, Dad. I'd never seen Agatha cry before. She was saying she'd ruined everything, that you'd never forgive her, that I wouldn't forgive her. And you? I asked. Have you forgiven her? Hubert took a deep breath. I don't know, he answered honestly. What she did, it wasn't just a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was an elaborate plan that lasted for months. She's been lying to me this whole time. How can I trust her after that? I don't know, son. I put my hand on his shoulder. That's for you to decide. But whatever you decide, I'll support you. We ate lunch at a small restaurant on the beach, enjoying fresh seafood and a view of the ocean. Hubert told me about his work, about his plans for the future, about how his views had changed in the last few days. You know, Dad, he said when we were done with dessert, I always thought Agatha was just looking out for you, that she wanted the best for you, just expressing it, a little too insistently. And now I see that she was trying to control you. Like she controls me, he shook his head. And I was letting her. We both did. It's not an easy situation, Hubert, I said. Agatha is a strong woman, determined. Those qualities can be both positive and negative, depending on how you use them. Yes, but there's a difference between strength and manipulation, Hubert argued, between caring and control. I agree, I nodded, and I think Agatha's starting to realize that too. I hope so, Hubert sighed, because I don't know if I can go on living like I used to, always looking to her for approval, afraid to speak my mind. You don't have to live like that, son, I said firmly. No one should. After lunch, I walked Hubert to the cruise terminal. We hugged goodbye. I'm going to miss you, Dad, he said. When will you be back in Pittston? In a week, I answered. I want to enjoy the island a little more. Maybe decide what to do with the villa and the business. Good, Hubert nodded. I'll visit you as soon as you get back. Without Agatha, if you don't mind. Of course I don't mind, I smiled. I'd love to spend time with you. We hugged again, and Hubert left for the ship. I stood on the dock for a long time, watching the Caribbean dream slowly sail away, taking my son and his wife to the next point in their journey. Did I feel satisfied with the way things had turned out? Not really, no, but I definitely felt like I was finally taking control of my life, and that was a good feeling. I spent the next week in the Bahamas, discussing with Errol the details of selling Oliver's stake in the company and looking at the villa for possible use as a personal residence. In the end, I decided to keep it for myself as a place where I could visit in the winter to escape the Pennsylvania cold, and as a memory of a brother who, despite our differences, had not forgotten me at the end of my life. Returning to Pittston in mid-November, I found my home exactly as I had left it. No surprises, no uninvited guests. For the first few days, I just enjoyed the peace and quiet, recovering from all the events. On the third day after my return, Hubert called. Hi, Dad. His voice sounded a little nervous. Are you home yet? Yeah, I got back 3 days ago, I answered. How are you? I'm okay, he paused. Can I come over to your place tonight? Sure, I said. I'll be waiting. Hubert arrived alone, as promised. We ate together. I had prepared a simple but hearty dinner, a roast from Beatrice's recipe and apple pie for dessert. During the meal, we talked about neutral topics, the weather, Hubert's work, my plans for the villa in the Bahamas. It wasn't until after dinner, when we moved into the living room with cups of coffee, that Hubert broached the main topic. Agatha and we've decided to live apart for a while, he said, looking into his cup. I rented a small apartment not far from work. Oh, I tried to hide my surprise. That's a big decision. Yeah, Hubert sighed. After everything that happened in the Bahamas, I just can't look at her the way I used to. Trust is broken, Dad, and I'm not sure it can be rebuilt. I'm sorry, son, I said sincerely. Don't be, Hubert smiled weakly. Perhaps it's for the best. I'm finally beginning to realize how much control she's had over my life all these years, how I let her make all the decisions for me. It was unhealthy. So what is it now? I asked. Are you thinking about divorce? Not yet, Hubert shook his head. Right now, I just need space, time to think, to figure out what I really want out of life. That's a wise decision, I nodded approvingly. Take your time. You don't decide these things in haste. Thank you, Dad, Hubert smiled genuinely for the first time all night, for understanding, for your support, for, everything. In the weeks that followed, Hubert came to visit me regularly, once or twice a week. We had dinner together, watched old movies, sometimes just talked for hours. I could see that he was gradually changing, becoming more self-confident, speaking his own mind more often, making decisions without looking to Agatha for approval. Agatha herself had never been to my house since my return from the Bahamas. She occasionally sent formal greetings through Hubert, but never offered to meet. I was even glad of that. Our relationship would never go back to the way it had been, and we both realized it. In early December, I received a letter from Errol. He reported that all the formalities with the sale of Oliver's share in the Caribbean Adventures of Curlington completed, and the money was transferred to my account. He also wrote that Villa Côte d'Azur was ready for my next visit, and that he had hired a manager to look after it in my absence. At the end of the letter was a note. I have booked you on the flight to Nassau on January 15th, as we discussed. The weather here is beautiful, warm, sunny, ocean-like steamed milk, perfect for an escape from the Pennsylvania winter. I look forward to your return to the island. I smiled, imagining sitting on the villa's terrace, watching the sunset over the ocean. Maybe Hubert would come to visit for a week or two. We could fish, swim, explore the island like we did when we went to Lake Wallenpaupack when he was a kid. Life has definitely changed since I got the letter from Mr. Preston about Oliver's inheritance. But not just because of the money or the villa in the Bahamas. The main change was in myself. I was no longer the quiet, compliant man who let others decide for him. I had finally found my voice, and for that I was grateful not only to Oliver and his unexpected inheritance, but also, oddly enough, to Agatha. Her attempt to manipulate me, to take away my tickets and say, "You're not going," was the turning point that made me stand up and say, "No, this is my life, and I'm going to live it the way I see fit." Sometimes it takes a strong push to find the courage to change, and I got that push. Better late than never, as Beatrice used to say. In mid-December, when the first serious snow fell in Pittston, Hubert came to me with an unexpected proposition. "Dad," I was thinking, "maybe I could go to the Bahamas with you in January," he asked almost shyly. "I haven't been able to take a proper vacation in a long time, and after everything that's happened." "Of course, son," I said excitedly. "I would be very glad. There's plenty of room in the villa, and Errol has already booked tickets for me. I'll just have to buy another one for you." "That would be great," Hubert smiled. "Just the two of us. Like the old days when we used to go fishing, remember?" "Oh, of course I remember," I smiled too. "You always wanted to catch the biggest fish in the lake." "And I never did," Hubert laughed. "But maybe I'll have better luck in the Caribbean." "You will," I said confidently. "Errol has a great fishing boat. He promised to lend it to us when I got back." We spent the evening discussing plans for the trip, and I noticed that Hubert was really enthusiastic in a way he hadn't been in years. Perhaps he, like me, needed to break out of his routine, out of Agatha's control, to remember who he really was. That evening, as I walked my son to the door, I suddenly thought about how bizarrely life works. Who would have thought that a random inheritance from a brother I hadn't spoken to in 20 years would not only give me financial independence, but also help me rebuild my relationship with my son? That my quiet rebellion against an overbearing daughter-in-law would lead to such profound changes in our family? And that I, Norman Curlington, at the age of 65, would suddenly discover a courage I had not known before? Life is indeed full of surprises, and some of them are for the best.